First of all, I would like to thank Jihan Zakaria and Agoston Berets who accepted our invitation to be panelists on this event. Due to some last-minute connectivity issues, I had to drop in and replace Mona Simeon as moderator in this breakout session. I'm a plant biologist, so Katalin Solyomsi, and the chair of the YIE. But I'm not so far from social sciences and humanities because both of my parents work in humanities. First, let's have the two presentations, I would suggest, and afterwards we'll have time for the Q&A for questions. I don't know what happened. Jihan, you just stopped the sharing?
Yeah, I don't know if I should go first or...
Yes, you will be the first. And so please, if you have any questions, drop it in the Q&A in the chat, and after the two presentations, we'll answer to them. This way, the speakers will have time to look at the chat, and maybe there are questions which come up twice, or maybe some will be answered by the second speaker. So to make it effective, now I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Jihan Zakaria. She's a literary scholar, originally based in Egypt, if I know properly, and then she won an ERC with which she moved from Denmark to Norway. And she will present now and share her experience with ERC with us. So Jihan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me today to share my experience with my ERC application. I applied in 2022. And it was actually the last chance to apply for starting grant, the 7-year deadline after my PhD. And I had an idea and I wanted to apply for the ERC grant, and I made a quick decision to apply. But I will talk more about this, but in general, about my own experience. By the application, actually, you divide it into form and content, and then the interview, and this is my experience. I knew I have to fill part 1 and part 2, and I knew that part 1 is very important, specifically for step number 1, because it is reviewed. If you are successful, you move to step number 2. I knew before when I was applying that the abstract is very important, and of course it's very demanding application because you need to focus so much, and it requires a lot of focus and writing and reviewing and rewriting. And my application actually had field work, so it was the first time to write an ethics self-assessment. The content, I knew also that it's a scientific excellence. So I know the focus will be on the project itself, on the idea I am representing. And interdisciplinary comparative perspectives are welcomes. Of course, it's an ambitious project in general. And I was advised that it is better to be relevant to current events, whether social, culture, political, whatever. And of course, medical and this stuff. And the sentences that was now deleted, high gain and high risk. I took it positive at that time. I thought of high gain as something that adds new knowledge or gives a voice to marginalized studies or something like that. And this is relevant to my project. And high risk, I thought it's something, when you explore new ideas and new thoughts, there is maybe not the expected outcome, but there is a benefit. But how strong is this benefit? Or how certain it will be? Was the argument. So for me, when I started, of course, as application in 2022, it was these 6 panels if you're humanities, and I choose number 5. But there is a change about this. I don't want to confuse you. But with this basic information, I started to go to my application. Actually, in my application, it's called Gulf Feminisms. This is the acronym of my application. And as you see, I'm studying the history of the feminist movements in the Gulf. And the title itself is interesting because it's in plural, feminisms, and also because it's the Gulf. So for me, I want to give voice to people, to feminist movements that have been marginalized, not only worldwide, but also even within Arabic and Middle Eastern studies. So feminismists, our feminist movements are movements that start to give women the rights, started in the West, of course, late 18th century, and moved to worldwide, including the Arab world, and they ask for basics, women's equality within the family, because marriage law in the West were very oppressive and sexist, to political rights. Then in the 60s and 80s, in the 60s, we have sexual rights. It's different ways women gain their rights gradually. But it's not only about women, and this is the misconception, because when you talk about sexual rights, not only the rights for women, there are other what we call minorities. So my argument is that women in the Middle East, in the Gulf, have been fighting for these rights, have been part of the world change that is asking for equality between different classes, different genders. And but their history was marginalized, given the fact that the focus on these Gulf states is merely on the oil production. And the way the Gulf countries represent themselves as very specific culture, even they represent themselves as different from other North African or Middle Eastern countries. So, but at the same time, and this is after 2011, Arab Spring, the demonstrations in all Arab countries, starting in North African country. I know many people may know about Egypt, because everything was documented, videos, pictures, everything about the revolution in the Middle East. Women were essential partners in the revolution. Millions of Arab women, common women who are not affiliated with any feminist movement or any intellectual background, they were common women, participated in the revolutions. And that's why the revolution succeeded to remove these deep states dictators. And we know about Egypt, about Tunisia, about, of course, Libya, where there is a civil war, about Syria, another civil war, about Bahrain in the Gulf, where it becomes violent. But it happened also in the 3 case studies in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Emirates. However, the media coverage of these events was very low because we didn't have much access. And the way the regimes in these countries dealt with the revolutions and women's rights was different as well. They tried to give the protesters many economic and social gains or whatever rights. And women were given a lot of rights after Arab Spring, after the demonstration in these countries, because actually, this is my argument, they have a voice, and there is a real change in the culture in these Gulf states. So I'm looking at these Gulf states in the 70s up until the moment, with different historical changes in these Gulf states, specifically also another trend, which is the Arab Spring and its impact on the Middle East in general. And I'm looking about how women in these countries are very diverse. We are having radical feminists, we are having state feminists. And this is very relevant to the Gulf states, because actually women have to mobilize and act and to change and ask for the rights without having the legal right to, but the system itself, the legal system in these countries, prevent any political or feminist or civil organization from acting. So they have a different form of activism. And here we go to educational institutions that become a platform for changing women's culture and increasing their awareness. But also it was very confluent. There is a lot of conflicts because we are having liberal feminists, state feminists who represent the state. We are having Islamists. And here we come to the Islamic project in the Middle East. We are having the regime, whether military regimes or these Gulf states, very deep-seated monarchies, but also Islamists are there and have power. So religion and Sharia were used by the regimes to actually balance the political power between Islamists and the military, like in North African, or the royal families. So women have to deal with this deep connection between very regressive forms of Islamic, political Islam, and the oppressive regimes. But also because of their diversity, because of what we call the change within society, because the Gulf, the emergence of oil, they become suddenly open to the West, to the whole world, with different immigrants from different backgrounds, pushing for a change in culture and a change in the legal system, intermarriages. And women benefited from this, natives and non-natives as well. And we are having, of course, what is very this is international trend, Islamic feminism, which is those scholars that defend Sharia and Islam against these politicizing or the politicization or the political uses of Islam. So this is, I find it quite important project, and I believe that we should give a voice and try to explore what was happening on the cultural level in these Gulf states. It was relevant to the current events, because actually in 2022, Emirates gives equal payment to men and women, while in some Western countries, still women are not paid equally to men. In Oman, which is a very conservative, but also they have a specific different way of looking at the conditions of women are quite different. I spent 2 years teaching in Oman, and 99% of my students were female students. And they all are covered by grants, governmental grants and scholarship, because actually after Arab Spring, after their participation in protests. So it's relevant. And although the Arab Spring didn't bring the political change we aspired for and failed in political levels in many ways, who maintained pushing for their rights and making a change until the moment were women. And I'm focusing on these Gulf states. In 2018, for example, the guardianship system, which is claimed to be based on Sharia, which deprives Saudi women of their rights to have an ID, and they are depending on men in everything, was reformed, and women got many rights. So there is a really change happening. And although there is argument is that the regimes try to improve their pictures, I argue the opposite. There is a really change within these societies because of education, because of social and cultural changes, and women have been fighting for their rights, but not in a traditional way. So I want to explore what is feminism in these countries and how these different feminisms actually collide. Of course, there are a lot of shared interests, but also disagreements, and how they persist and fight for their rights. And also the feminist movements in the Middle East in general are actually criticized as Western, imported from the West. And in Egypt, Tunisia, you will see that they are trying to change our culture and to bring Western values to our Middle Eastern Islamic values. And always there are international organizations working with this. But in the Gulf, there are women supported by themselves and moving from within the society. So the idea of feminism itself, especially after Arab Spring, has it changed? And I want to know the improvement in the perception of the feminist movement. When I was actually, this is the idea, I have been working on this idea for a while before the application. I remember when I applied, it was Corona time. So actually the deadline was in January. And I started writing and focusing on the writing and getting review on my application in August. So it was quite intensive time for me. Of course, I decided to apply. It doesn't matter that I have short time, because it was the last chance to apply for ERC. So after the project, I was convinced with the idea, and I wrote the first proposal. The feedback on my proposal actually was quite critical, and I took it quite well as well. So I expect criticism. I accept it. And I worked on that criticism, because when I look at my first draft and the final one, I can see that, no, they were right in their criticism. So I took it very serious, and I received different criticisms. But my experience is that I read one ERC proposal in medicine and one in social and human sciences, and I find it quite confusing to read an application in a different field. This is me. So if you are going to read an application as a reference, I advise that you go for applications that in your field, because I felt I've benefited more from that. And also the feedback I felt that the more people are specialized in my area, the more benefit I get. So this is also when you ask somebody to give a feedback in your application, try to consult people in your field, or a slight away from your field, but also with major knowledge, because they are more realistic in their criticism. And this is why I talk about it when I come to the interview. So this is about the project itself. Of course, the CV, and to be honest with you, I'm in humanities, but I have never written a narrative CV. So in general, I try to write 2 paragraphs, as you see, describing my additions to the field, which is, as I said, I believe is not a big addition, but I believe I'm looking at marginalized or understudied domains. For example, environmental violence, eco-criticism, and eco-critical studies in the Arab world. It is still mainly Western focused. So this is how I approach it, the CV. Also, I tried, to also write a narrative of how many conferences I attended, how many invited presentations, and to give examples of the cities and towns I have, of the places I have been to. Okay, so also about articles, about monographs, and I decided to choose some articles to give a summary. That articles that I believe were somehow new and innovative in their representation, or made a different addition to the field, to my field. So I choose some articles and try to give explanations why they best represent my academic contribution. But to be honest with you, this is, of course, before coming to the interview, I didn't focus much when I was writing my CV. I was much worried about the project itself and the excellence. So, but now they are focusing more in the narrative CV. I believe that if the project is excellent, and when you are writing your proposal, or you have an idea and you believe in your idea, try to just say, when I was writing the CV, how they relate to my previous, because I have experience in that, but also make a new addition to my field, to my expertise. Because in my work, as you see, it's a literary field, literary studies. I haven't done any field work before. But in my application, I have decided to do field work in the 3 case studies, which is challenging as well, because you are dealing with field work in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Emirates, very conservative countries, and also about women. However, and I was worried so much about this point because I don't have experience. And I explained that I will hire postdocs because they will have experience. But at the same time, before that, we are going to have a training because I want to develop a new skill through my project. So I will be part of the team, doing field work, participate in it, and at the same time I will gain training, but also I will get expertise, postdoc who have experience or expertise in field work. So it was also, for me, this is risky, but it's very beneficial. I felt that I should invest in myself as a BI when I was writing the application. So this is also a new doing field work in these countries in relation to women was also something new, and I wanted to do it, actually. But when I was writing the application, I always think of the negative sides. So I wanted to hire the postdoc after a year. So the first year I will organize my ideas, because Arabic is my first language. I can do the field, I can do this work alone. And at the same time, I delayed a little bit the field work to month 18 because we need some training. So I wanted, when I was writing, I want to cover the weak points from my own point of view. And I also wanted to organize or divide work to have expertise in field work to help me. Then I was selected for the second part, which was a 3-minute presentation, very short time. And actually, at that time, I was at Aarhus University, and they organize like mock sessions for me too. And it was very helpful because I did many mistakes, starting from technical mistakes to the timing, which I wasn't very much alert at that time. But also I gave long answers, which they would advise you not to do it. But the people who interviewed me were ERC. They had ERC grants, but from a different fields. And It was the way they asked me, actually, sometimes were confusing because they asked questions I didn't expect. The reviewer were asking me, a way of thinking as somebody from humanities. It was challenging, but they helped me to widen my perspective, what to expect. Although in the real interview, actually, all the questions were expected within what you expect as somebody from humanities. But they helped me to find the weaknesses. And when I went into the interview, actually, to be honest with you, I wasn't so nervous as before. I was super happy. And the questions were quite expected. And somewhere I didn't expect so much. Of course, they asked me about ethics. Visibility of the fieldwork, they didn't focus much, which gives me like courage and confidence, because they trust I can do the fieldwork in these countries. They are asking about ethics, the ethics, and how I'm going to take approvals in these countries to do the fieldwork and data management and how to protect the personal data, which is interesting. Of course, the comparative perspective and the potential of different outcomes because of the 3 case studies, because the 3 case studies are Arabs and Muslim, but Sharia is quite different. The conditions of women are quite different as well. And the achievements of women are similar and different. So it was expected as well. But in general, the interview, people were very friendly. I didn't feel any attack or something. But also, if somebody asked me about the production, I mean, I stated that I will publish 2 articles in the first year, and they will say to me, it's too much. Do you think you can do it? Especially in the humanities, and this is very important. Publications takes a very, very long time compared to other fields like medicine and science. Yes, okay. So after my experience, actually, to be honest with you, you have to start early. But as I told you, I started writing my application in August, and I submitted in January. It was very intense work. It took all of my time. For me, of course, it was very helpful to read a relevant application. As I told you, when I read an application in medical field, it was quite confusing to me. But in humanities, it was much helpful. But of course, we are different. This is for me. My application, as I said, I took criticism as advice. So although I received harsh criticism at the beginning of my application, it helped me to improve it so much, especially it was a short time to write my application and get feedback. And of course, I contacted people I trust and colleagues in my field, and they were excellent in giving me feedback. But something I didn't get, which I find very beneficial, is writing workshop, because I had a colleague who had a writing workshop, and she benefited a lot. So if you can join a writing workshop, it will be very beneficial to you. And I think it will help you to be more practical in writing your application. So I will finish now, and we can have a discussion or questions. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jihan. I think for the sake of the time and effectivity, maybe we should move to our next speaker, and then afterwards, in between, you may have a look at the questions in the chat, and if there are some you can answer quickly, then please do.
Thank
so.
You. So, yeah, sure.
Okay, and then now I would like to introduce our second speaker, Ágoston Berec, who is a historian from Hungary. And in contrast to Jihan, he is not yet a member of the Young Academy of Europe. He is working at the Central European University, and he just secured recently an ERC starting grant, and I hope he will be able to share his experience with us. And yeah, his application is also interesting for us because he's from an EU13 country where it seems like it is maybe a bit more hard to get ERCs. So, Ágoston, the floor is yours. You are muted.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay, so thank you for the presentation. And I'm actually, our ERC is like 4 months into its operation. So we started in February. Just to briefly introduce the project. So this is a historical project, a team project about minority nationalism from below. That is a social history of minority nationalism, a comparative one. So we compare 5 case studies, if I'm not mistaken, everybody dealing with a separate unit, so a separate case study. This is the idea. The time frame is the half a century before the First World War in East Central Europe. And the novelty or innovation factor is to bring in state agency, because usually, like, paradigmatically, when historiography deals with how people became national, like consciously national, they mostly have in mind like titular majorities or state-bearing majorities, like French people in France. So that is the paradigmatic context. And then they always tackle with the state as a kind of a main nationalizing agent, and all these channels and agencies like army and schools have somehow regulated, maintained, even initiated by the state. But when we come to like minority entities, minority groups, then suddenly like we have to deal with a different context, and traditionally it is the perspective of the later nation states that like came to include these former minorities, that takes the upper hand, and they kind of project back the 20th century state institutions to the earlier times, and they took take these infrastructure, these associations, maybe ethnic churches, so these bundles of institutions as a kind of proxy state. So and this is right to some extent, but what I wanted to bring in is the actual state policies against which just normal people on the ground reacted, because in this context, this minority nation building coincided with a very, very strong state building, state penetration. So the earlier patrimonial power was taken over by the state. So people had been punished by the local landlords. Now it was all about the state. The state stepped in, like issued regulations, rose taxes. There was a very, very spectacular rise in taxes in this period. Started to suddenly regulate everything, declared a bunch of things to be monopolies, and so I was interested in how why people got aligned with these minority nationalisms, and what stakes they had, and what agency we can attribute to them as separate from the elites nationalizing groups, so the national movements themselves. So that was the idea, and I had a head start there because I had taught this topic before at CEU, and also at ELTE, so twice. And also I had support from CEU, so also technical support. We have a dedicated ERC coordinator who could help me with drafting the budget. I hear this is very often a problem. I had a supervisor who kind of works in a related field, and he pushed me into like emphasizing the uniqueness and like kind of bringing to the fore the innovative potential by like pushing this state penetration context, and also highlighting that we are dealing with minority groups. So what he actually told me is that the panel won't be interested in just showing a couple of new case studies if they don't differ substantially what has been already studied in the case of other groups. But still, I went for case studies which haven't been that with with a source basis very intensively. So I chose these case studies differ a lot between them in terms of the so-called host states, so the states where they actually lived. So it could be a state with a nationalizing agenda. The cases in point are the Kingdom of Hungary and the Kingdom of Prussia within the German Empire. And so I took Romanians and Slovaks in Hungary and Poles in the Prussian partition of the former Polish Commonwealth. But then there is also the other Polish-speaking minority under the Romanov Empire. And this is to some extent an exception because it has been dealt with very extensively. It seems to be a very well-studied population. So I also take this knowledge basis that they have amassed, like Polish historians, as a kind of a benchmark. And then there are Slavs. Like it might be controversial whether they were Slovenes or Croats along the Adriatic coast that belong to the Habsburg Empire. Now, the unique thing about them, like I failed to mention that in Russia, Russian Empire had an ambiguous policies towards Poles. So they didn't want to Russify Poles, but they still introduced Russification policies in order to kind of disarm them. So that makes them very different. So Russia is typically described as a nationalizing empire. So kind of in the case of Poles, they consider them a fringe population that would never become Russians, but it still raises a security problem. And in the case of the Adriatic, that is a very unique setup because here we have locally dominant, culturally Italian and pro-Italian, like irredentist elites who have their own fight with the central Viennese administration, but that doesn't have this, like the Viennese administration in its turn doesn't have this nationalizing agenda. So the obvious, what C was at my former supervisor pushed me is to reach out to people who are whom I could then hire, so potential members, but your mileage might vary on this point. So I also heard, and one of the model applications, model proposals that I used didn't name any one prospective member. So I don't think that really matters whether you include like a team or you just describe the positions and you tell in the proposal that you will look for the best suitable members once you get the funding. But I reached out to many people. Actually, neither of them. None of these people whom I mentioned in the proposal are now part of the team for various reasons. So I started working on it 1 year before the submission deadline in January or February, and I asked for 2 winning applications from related fields. One was actually very quite closely connected in terms of also the geographical space and also the time frame. It was Gabor Egri's, and there was another one. Actually, it was not a starting grant. Mine is a starting grant, but a consolidating grant. And Boris Kuzmanis from Vienna University, who had won a starting grant just 2 years before. And part of my calculations was also that that I assume there are always lobbyists for Eastern European topics, and Gabor's was an outgoing one, so it was kind of a similar comparative team project. Boris's was a little bit different, but there was one like a year off when no such proposal got funded. So I think I'm applying it the right year, and also I used this nifty tool that is online, where you can track who has been a member of the panel, of your panel, in the previous year and the previous like 5 or 10 years, and you can expect the same people alternating bi-yearly, so every 2 years. So that kind of helped me. Well, what I can remember is that there was one paragraph where I was hesitating whether to include it or not. It was about using subaltern studies as a kind of source of inspiration. I didn't want to go like all in on this point, but then I looked at the potential members, and I saw like at least 2 people who I assumed would resonate with this, so I chose to include it. Then it was a long process, so I rewrote it several times. I showed it to people and also shelved it. You know, this the same process that you kind of if you have time to work on a manuscript, then I would also advise you to do this like step back and get distance from it, and after like a month get back to it, and then you have like a fresh eye to read it anew and spot maybe logical mistakes, or the flow of the argument is not clear, things like this. And I also had like again coming back to CEU, we have an academic writing team, so they also helped me with better organizing more efficiently, more convincingly the text. So you should start this paragraph with a strong statement and then go into details. So this kind of stuff that is not immediately obvious to everybody. And in the case of ERC, you have to produce 2 versions of the same proposal, a shorter one and a longer one. So what to include in the shorter one. But basically, when I was writing and brainstorming, I used my previous notes. So also when I taught this topic, but also the notes that I took while reading stuff, and then I could collect my references. And then I got back to the same notes while preparing for the interview, again, for getting prepared to potential questions that the panel might ask. And then at CEU, but also in Vienna, in the Institut für Wissenschaften that mentioned, there was a mentoring event. So I think it helped me enormously, but I will come back to this, because it also got me in some trouble, like misled me. Like one particular piece of advice that I got. But there again, part of this mentoring course was like kind of an academic writing session, like a one-on-one session, and really hands-on. Okay, so then, yes, what the advice I also got here at CEU is to present my proposal at a workshop before I submit it. And I did that. So I was on a fellowship in Vienna, and I organized it there at the media lab. It like technically it went down very messy, but there were like 8 people joining in online, and there were like 2 attendees like physically, and so I also got feedback on that, and I tried to incorporate all the feedback that I got. So then I submitted, and in May year 1, so maybe 16 months into the process, I got the notification that they shortlisted me for the interview. The interview took place in August, and then I I really spent 2 months preparing for the interview. So I even moved to a quiet place, and I read my text like something like 20, 30 times to spot like any potential problems. And I got prepared with a list of questions that they might raise, and the answers. And I organized mock interviews with people from this field, and I rehearsed my answers. Now, I also had a technical blimp. Oh, and I reinstalled Windows, because it turned out that they use a video software at the interview, which doesn't operate safely on Linux. I found it out because here at CU we have like media labs, and we have like support, technical support, and then there was no voice, and we couldn't get it to have voice. So so finally I realized that I had to reinstall Windows on a computer which originally came with the Windows, but then I no longer had Windows in it, but then I reinstalled Windows. It was also quite a complicated process, but still I had a technical issue because it turned out that not only like it works fine in the Windows version, but it turned out that you are not supposed to open too many windows. So when I was prompted to enter this interview room, then I had too many windows open, and I couldn't bring up my slides. And I didn't understand what was going on, and obviously it confused me. So I got nervous. That was the first issue. So it took something like 3 minutes of the interview time. Oh, and I have to add that ERC always changes. Like it always changes by panel how much time you have for the interview, but we knew it in advance. So one thing we didn't get the evaluations sent to us before the interview. So we didn't know what issues the external experts had with our longer version, because the panel in the first round only reached the shorter version. So they only sent it afterwards, but we knew how much time we had for the actual presentation. I think that the time slot allotted to the interview is more or less the same. Where I was wrong is that I was also told that probably that will be enough for 4 or 5 questions, and the panel turned out to be more ambitious, and they squeezed like something like 8 questions into this this time frame. So they always interrupted me, which also got me quite nervous. But when they interrupt me, that is also a sign that they assume that I know the answer, and that I can go on endless. But I always had less time to answer than what I expected. But my first problem was with the first question, and most important question probably, and that was rather specific, because from my mentor at the Vienna mentoring event. And there were like 3 of them, and 2 out of them were Germans. And they had very strong reaction against my use of the word peasant. And I knew that they were wrong, like they were applying their very German perspective, because it turned out that in German, like German social history, Bauer is something very specific. So it is somebody like a smallholder, but still with like, I don't know, 20, 30 acres of land, and with farmhands working for him. So it is kind of a well-to-do peasant. I knew this is not the meaning that Anglo-Saxon scholarship attributes to this term, but I speculated there were also Germans on the panel, so I wanted to avoid all complication, and they told me to substitute it with something, and I came up with the kind of awkward term rural non-elites. And obviously the panel's first question was about this, and they somehow assumed that I have a kind of strong theoretical background behind this term, like relating to elite theories. And I couldn't improvise anything but just a very like like extension, like describing what actual groups I mean under elites, and then the others would be non-elites. But actually, in nationalism theory, they use these non-elites and elites rather freely and without any definition. But you shouldn't assume that people on the panel will have the same mindset. So that I think that got me in trouble, and probably that was the reason that I didn't get the grant right away, but I was put on the waiting list. And the project spent something like interview was in August, and I got final notification in June next year. So it was almost 2.5 years after I started working on it. So, and this last year was the most stressful year of my life, probably. So you want to avoid this and try to relate to the advice that you get during these mentoring events critically, which I also did, but I kind of speculated that other Germans turn up and they will have the same reaction against peasant as a term. I think this much. Do I have time left, or I should rather try to engage with the questions?
Yes, I think so. Thanks, Ágoston, very much for your insightful talk. I hope that everyone had some really useful advice, both from you and from the part of Jihan. So Jihan started to answer some questions in the chat. So if there are any questions you would like to ask directly, maybe, I mean, to Jihan, then please go ahead, or if Jihan wants to answer some of them, I think you can unmute yourself. We are only 23 in this breakout session. Just put your hands up and ask questions, or until we are waiting that maybe if Jihan wants to share something that's very interesting in the chat.
Yes, actually, I just want to say also I was advised by a colleague to know about the panel members who are going to review my application. Did I do that? No. I'm sorry, because it was a short time, I focused on the application, and I thought if it's convincing, I mean, everyone can engage with it. So, but also I was advised, so maybe the attendants or people who are intending to apply can do this. But we are different. I mean, for example, I find attending interview, the mock interviews as somehow intimidating sometimes because they were coming from a different background and they're asking questions that I find irrelevant. You know, we are different, but in general, it's beneficial to get feedback from different our help. Again, if the people who want to apply, if they can attend writing workshop, it will be very beneficial. I think it's very important. I didn't have a chance to do that, but I think it's very good. Can you do it, Katalin, our writing workshop?
You mean in Hungary, or you mean that the Young Academy?
Young Academy, yes.
I'm not sure. I think these are either companies, yes? Have you been to a kind of professional company who did this writing workshop, or how was it managed?
I know, I think it was, I haven't attended, but okay. My colleague attended, it was organized by her university. But I don't know if we can do it or not. But I think most universities in Europe will provide help. Maybe people who want to apply can approach their institutions and ask to organize a writing workshop for ERC grants, and they can ask for help.
Yeah, so maybe we could think about this later if we have a relevant experience, or might ask some people from Academia Europaea, for instance, who are sitting on those juries and reading and evaluating proposals. Maybe that
especially
could be a good idea.
One.
Yeah, for next year's mentoring event, that could be a good idea. Are there any questions maybe Ágoston or Jihan found useful to answer, or is there anyone who has unanswered questions? Yeah, I know there are many things in the chat, and I have difficulties to sort out of whom to pick or what. Yeah, for example, we have just a really recent one, how you can find a mentor. I think you can contact also maybe ERC, and they also offer a kind of mentoring scheme. And the Young Academy of Europe, on our homepage, if you go and check out, I think either the second or the third event description, there will be a link to an Excel sheet in which for the social sciences and humanities domain, some Young Academy of Europe members volunteered to act as mentors, and they indicated for which panels they can help. There are not many names there, but please look up at that homepage. I can drop it in the chat, but it was also presented on the plenary part, and then you may find the mentors if you don't have any in your own institution.
I think all institutions will provide mentoring through the first, writing phase. The first part, the application.
Probably, yeah, I agree. The quality, or if they don't have much experience themselves with winning or winner ERC grants, maybe that can be limiting in that one. But try to use any possibilities you have and anything that can help you. Is there anything maybe Agoston you saw in the chat? Yeah, whether the comparative things, yes, whether it's useful, that has been asked, but already Jihan answered that it's not necessarily
not easy as well. Yeah, I think we can just say it should be comparative or interdisciplinary all the time. But it's an advantage in some cases to compare between different cases.
Yeah, I saw the comment. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing well the name of ISTE about worrying for EU13 countries which have lower availability. So I'm not sure, and there are many differences between the research culture in EU13 and other countries, but that's really true that, for example, in the UK, in University College London, you have mock oral interview, as Gemma Modino's former chair of the Young Academy explained. They have much more support than in our countries. But we all have national contact points, and there is always possibility to ask them, because also in Hungary we have some people who have experience. Yes, this is one of the reasons why we decided to organize this kind of events, to try to help you some way, in some ways. Okay, I'm checking other comments. Or Agoston, did you find something you would like to answer in the 1 or 2, 3 more minutes we have? It's a bit hard to scroll all these questions and comments. You are muted, Agoston.
Yes, I just wanted to add it takes all sorts. Somebody joined it and said that it doesn't require external support to write a brilliant proposal. But I think that these inequalities between host countries, why so few people from like this eastern part of Europe get ERC grants come down to the question of institutional support that our universities can provide, and exactly Hungarian universities don't usually have that. So I think we are at CU, we are privileged, and from what I heard that so I would advise Hungarian applicants to get in touch with like a German university or a Norwegian university, because they can provide so much more support during the writing period. And yes, I was also told, actually, although multinational and comparative are two different issues, so it can be multinational or transnational without going into comparisons. But I was told by multiple people that applying with like a strictly national topic when you do history, I kind of begs the question of why would they fund it instead of your national funding institutions.
Are there any comments or thoughts maybe you would like to ask? There was one question maybe I saw somewhere from, I'm not sure, Katona Gergely, was it? No, it wasn't for this part, yeah. In between, I also have both the questions from the plenary part and this one, so it's also not so easy. Esther Neumann, I don't know if you are still among us, if you have, because I saw some of your questions. But... Okay, then if nobody wants to have any other further questions, then I would just like to thank again our two speakers for accepting this invitation and sharing all this experience with us and the audience. And I really do hope it will be useful for those planning to apply for ERC grants, starting grants basically, but I think this could be also useful for consolidator grant applications as well. So then that's the way I will close this session and wish you a nice evening or afternoon. Goodbye.